I am CB Bhattacharya, and in the next 20 minutes or so, I just want to give you a quick update on what these 3 years have been like. So the center was founded, actually, I believe the launch was on August 24th, 2019, if my memory is cooperating with me. And we had the launch meeting, which was in person, and some of you were there at the launch meeting, the inauguration. And then we had one meeting in February 2020, which was in person. And since then, everything has been under the wraps of COVID. It's been long distance, no, whatever you call that, in the Zoom world. And this time, when cases started going down and things started opening up, I told my colleagues that we needed to have a celebration. I mean, you know, because yeah, we've done quite a bit. So let's see what we have. Let me take you through that journey. So our purpose, really, the reason why we exist is we want to help businesses thrive for all. And the thrive for all part is really important to us because business for too long has really worked for a few and not for, you know, for the top 1% and not for the other 99. And we want to do our part in changing that. So whatever we do to help businesses, we want to do that for all the employees, for all the stakeholders. And so the mission is really what we want to do is to help companies get the biggest bang for their buck on their sustainability investments. And why is this important? It's important because many companies today know that they have to be sustainable. They know the why, but they don't necessarily know the what or the how. So what should we invest in? How can we optimize our investments across different initiatives and all of that complex stuff? And that's where we come in, and that's where we can help companies move along. And we have now defined three work streams on which we want to focus, because if we try to do everything in sustainability, we'll make a mess out of it. So the three work streams, the first one is decarbonize Middle America. We are sitting in Middle America, and we have this whole Appalachian region of the country, which is still very much stuck in fossil fuels and the opioid crisis. And there needs to be a transition there to the new economy. And that's a challenge that we've taken on. And this is a project that we've been working on with the city of Pittsburgh. And we can talk more about that informally later on. It'll come up again in more slides. The second work stream that we have defined for ourselves is Workforce 100. So this is kind of mimics the renewable energy or the RE100. And the idea here is that, again, you know, that the transition to the new economy
workers, and neither do the economic impact. They ripple through all of our communities from the middle out and from the out in. So what we've shared with Chris is developing focus areas. The climate action plan was one where we had a lot of cross-fertilization, and you have not lived until you try to get 51 communities to agree on a climate goal. Trust me. And we're still working on it. A lot of that has also been fed into the Reimagine Appalachia blueprint, which I worked on for the last 2 years. And so a good bit of the feedback that we received from our citizens also went into that. And we also signed on to the Marshall Plan for Middle America. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization of ideas that has happened in the last 3 years to the benefit of everyone in the region. I could go on for another half hour, but you don't need that, right?
Thank you, Dr. Marco. I think we'll pass it next to Professor Cudd. So Provost Cudd. All the formalities, lovely.
I really like the professor title as well. It reminds me of those golden days when I was just a philosophy professor.
There will be cocktails later, so anytime you'd like to wax over philosophy, we're more than happy to have those conversations. Provost Cudd, thinking about from the perspective from the university, CB was mentioning earlier, we have the educational aspirations of proposing and shifting are very what had originally started with the MBAs to span that out to any eligible graduate student or anyone professionally who is eligible to take graduate courses. And there have been a number of other collaborations that we've done with the broader university, but just looking back on your tenure so far, the last 3 years, what have you seen in the space of sustainable business and the university's involvement with the topic?
Great. First, let me also thank you for inviting me to come here today, and thank you all for attending. I remember just 3 years ago, the launch of this. Then there's been a bit of a crisis in between, but you have done so many things that been so resilient throughout the pandemic, but it's so great to be here in person once again, like we were at the launch. So yeah, I think the Center for Sustainable Business is so important to the university because our students, first of all, our students, virtually every student I talk to is so concerned about climate change. They're concerned about sustainability. They want to know how they can help, how they can make an impact, how they can help to save the planet. And I'm so grateful for those students I see out there who are nodding their heads. And so it is really key that we have a number of initiatives across the sustainability landscape, and very integral to that is business, of course. We need to have governmental policies, we need to have investments, but we need businesses, large and small, to take this on as really a serious project within. And I know that the Center for Sustainability is a champion of that, and bringing in sustainable or in businesses who are interested in being part of the solution of the future, from all different industries. And so I so appreciate that. I think that business education has begun to really, well, I shouldn't even say begun, because of course you were pretty much in the ground floor of this, but experiential education is such an important part of business education. And the Center for Sustainable Business has enabled students to be involved, to be in experiential opportunities. I'm thinking, of course, of the hackathon, the Pittsburgh Climate Hackathon, and getting to know, businesses and learning about ESG principles and things like that with business is an incredible opportunity for our students. But I would also have to say that the research that has been produced, particularly with the Marshall Plan for Middle America Roadmap, that is a signature piece, and I know that you will continue to build on that research. I saw a long list of working papers that I need to start reading, and I'm really grateful that your faculty are doing the research, which I knew they would, because of course the Pitt business is a top research enterprise in the business world. And then in thought leadership as well. I know you're doing many things. CB just had that great list of things that you've been doing in the last few years. I just mentioned the Global Clean Energy Forum. I believe you had a panel discussion that you led, Chris. The World Economic Forum, I know that CB has been presenting there. So there are a number of places where Pitt business is leading the way through the Center for Sustainable Business. So I thank you for that.
It's our honor, our pleasure. I think we'll keep it in academia for the moment, pass it down to our newly inaugurated Dean Gene Anderson. So
I missed the inauguration. When was that? Sounds like fun.
It was so much fun, we don't remember it. So knowing that you are new to the school and so do not have the benefit of memory of having been with us since the launch event 3 years ago, but you have seen within the business academia setting from a number of other schools how sustainable business has been a trend that business schools have been tackling. So Dean Anderson, what has been your perspective on sustainable business for the last 3 years? How have business schools been engaging on sustainable business?
So that's a great question. And again, I want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you for inviting me to take part in the panel. Yeah, I think that if you look back, not just over the last 3 years, but really over the last couple decades, there's been a growing and increasing recognition that if we're gonna find solutions to the kind of environmental and social sustainability challenges that we face, if business is not part of the solution, then there won't be any solutions going forward. And I think that recognition started to really kind of emerge and dawn on business schools back in the 90s. But it's really taken hold, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years. And what's happened at the center, which you've heard about from CB and from Provost Cudd here at Pitt, has really just been amazing. And it's part, frankly, of what attracted me here to the school, because I wanted to be at a university that was, well, a couple of things. One, that recognized the importance of sustainability for both business education and research as we look forward. And I wanted to be at a place that had taken steps not only to begin to address sustainability issues in the classroom, but to reach out and have a real impact on the community. And then closely related to that, I think the other thing that you've seen in business education and the business school industry generally is more interdisciplinary work around, because it's such a natural around sustainable enterprise. You've seen more and more interdisciplinary work going on, and I think there are great opportunities here at Pitt to continue to explore and to build on that going forward. I think a lot of, for example, of the interesting action is going to be kind of at the nexus of business and public policy. For example, because ultimately business is not going to solve this on its own. Government is not going to solve this on its own, but working together, that's where I think we're going to have the greatest impact. And I see business schools like ours on the research education front. We have the ability to convene these different groups and to really advance the conversation in an impactful way by really kind of operating at the nexus of education, business, government, and environmental and social sustainability going forward. And so I'm looking forward to building on, and I'm going through a strategic planning and visioning process at the school right now. So I don't want to get too far out over my skis with the faculty and staff. But I believe that integrating how we're gonna address and make communities like Pittsburgh not only more prosperous but more inclusive and sustainable going forward is going to be a very important priority for the school. So I'll stop right there.
Good, thank you. And last but not least, Andrew, thank you again for all the work that you've done with the Heinz Endowments and helping us not only get started, but then helping us scale up here in the most recent year. So from your perspective, working with the endowments and having a slightly broader view across multiple different sectors, not just governments, not just academia, but kind of seeing how the community as a whole has been or been not working really well together, where the things have been going. What has been your perspective over the last 3 years around sustainable business journey that we've all been working through together?
So we clearly lost some altitude with COVID, and now with a global energy crisis, it also perhaps creates some headwinds for us. But I'm certainly pleased. Let me just say, as a donor, I'm very pleased that the provost and the dean are here today. That institutional support is very meaningful to me. And so thank you both for your time today. And to my longtime colleague, Patty, thank you for being here today too. So we are at a inflection point in a number of ways in this region. And I'm going to say the region writ large, since the Marshall Plan for Middle America. Patty mentioned Reimagine Appalachia, which we're also a co-investor in. These movements, which began in 2019, 2020, at the same time I was meeting with CB and the business school faculty about the center, all have converged in ways that have helped create a once in a generation, probably 2 generations moment in terms of public sector investment in the transition away from extractive industries and externalities to the environment from economic activity. We have a real opportunity to address those. Another scholar, Bruce Katz at Drexel, who is the former head of the Metropolitan Policy Institute at Brookings, has a paper out that I recommend to you on the importance of public-private partnerships to seize this moment. Bruce works in cities all over the country, mid-size as well as large. And Bruce has also done a lot of work here and knows that fragmentation is something we have taken to an art form. This is the place to go when we have 175 taxing bodies in one county and all the things that come with that. Thank heaven for Connect and other groups to try to overcome that. I would note that the founder of the foundation I'm privileged to work for, Howard Hines, the son of H.J. Hines, in his 1895 valedictory address to Shadyside Academy, which was then just up the road, said, Pittsburgh has become a great city, but it is still not a great region. It must become one. And unfortunately, here in 2022, long after Mr. Hines's passing, we are not there. And that is to our disadvantage if we are to really take full advantage of the moment we're in and to seize the day. And, you know, the other side in terms of our enthusiasm for the center is it does help bring, we fund a lot of environmental advocacy, we fund a lot of public sector related activities, but as the dean just said, if we don't have the business community along, we probably won't reach our goals. So this is helping fill that gap for my programming, along with some other initiatives in the region, including the Reimagine Appalachia one. So that is in some where we are. We see the pieces moving. We have an immense amount of fragmentation and headwind that we have to overcome for this region to fully achieve the benefits. And I would add that while we are a mid-sized city, we are not a mid-sized climate emitter. Reaching the Paris Climate Accord goal of a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in warming from pre-industrial days. It's going to be very hard for this community in this region. But I don't think that means we give up. I don't think we avoid the challenge, but we need the kind of creativity and ingenuity that we've seen in some of the papers coming from this center and in some of the intellectual activity you're fomenting. So that's that. Thank you.
Pleasure. So kind of building on that one, I think one of the conversations, the quotes that stuck with me from the Global Clean Energy Action Forum was that we're not having conversations about coal mines or coal assets. We're having conversations about coal communities, right? How to not leave them behind. On the note of fragmentation, I'll pass the mic back over to Dr. DeMarco. So I get to hand out 2 sets of magic wands in this panel. So first one, looking forward, if you had a magic wand, from your perspective, where would you like the center to be? Like what would we have achieved? What is different about the world from your perspective? When we've been successful, what does that look like in the fragmented community that we have here in the Southwestern Pennsylvania area?
Well, first of all, I love the idea of having a magic wand because when we were writing our climate action plan, you hit a wall at around 2030 where things that can happen from local governance driving alone just end. There's no way we can move without enlightened public policy. And there's no way we can move to an enlightened public policy without the business community supporting it. So I think if I had a magic wand, I would build the kind of community that is transformed, not transitioned. We don't have time for transition. We have to do like a caterpillar and take the resources we have amassed, convert them into something different, something better, and that we will have a shared prosperity that results from that. And I think the really critical part of the collaboration with the universities is harnessing the intellectual capital. How many cities do you know of who have 8 accredited universities in their boundaries? 8. Okay, now I know we hear about it from the mayors because they complain about the tax base. But what spins out we spin out of the 488 small business resource centers in Pittsburgh, about 125 new businesses every year. And how many of you do you think come to our communities? So if I had a magic wand, I would take half at least of what comes out of the Alpha Labs and your center and all the Center for Innovation and have them find homes in the former coal, oil, gas, steel communities of Pittsburgh in our region. That I think would be a huge accomplishment, but it can't happen from any one center. We have to begin collaborating across the ivory tower barriers, and we have to continue collaborating among these individual entities. Connect is talking about shared fire services and shared police and emergency services so that we can be more effective, more efficient, and more responsive and resilient to our communities.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we'll go the same order as last time. So same idea, have a magic wand from the university perspective. How will we know that we've had success 3 years from now?
Well, so I'm really looking forward to the micro-credential that you're proposing and that I'm looking forward to its full development. And who knows what's next, maybe more micro-credentials that can be stacked into a degree program. That would be awesome as well. So, but as the provost having this sort of university-wide perspective, I would love to see the Center for Sustainable Business be really integrated with the other sustainability efforts across campus, right? Mascaro and those in public health and those in GISPIA, the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, those in the arts and sciences and environmental science and so forth, and see students being able to be part of, from any of those schools, part of sustainable business and have experiential opportunities that with businesses, in businesses, so that they can lend their, innovative dynamism to those businesses, and the businesses can also help them to get experience and professionalization so that they can be the leaders of the future that we know that they want to be. So on the education front, that's the main thing. I keep going on the research and the thought leadership front. I trust that the faculty that are involved in the Center for Sustainable Business will also collaborate with others across campus and on other campuses, certainly down the road at Carnegie Mellon and so forth, to do the research, which will lead to the smart public policy that will also engage the communities and come up with the solutions that the foundations will help fund and bring us all together.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Provost. And similarly from the business school perspective, Dean Jean, what is if we had a magic wand 3 years from now, how will you know that the center has been successful?
I think the provost just took my top 3 bullet points, which is fine, because if I was given a magic wand, I would
alignment is good.
give it to the provost. So I guess I would just add to that the interdisciplinary connections are right on, both on the educational and research front, but I'd also like to see them connected in the right way into business and the community here, so that we're finding really distinctive areas around sustainability, sustainable enterprise that bring together the strengths of Pitt and Pittsburgh together. And to the extent that the center can be a conduit for that, I think it's great. And if I could add just one more bullet point to the academic wish list here, it would be that the center's impact continues to grow and continues to change the conversation within the business school, both within its educational programs and on the research front, so that all of our students, for example, are more literate, have better frameworks, and a better sense of what kind of actions to take, both as individuals and with the companies that they're working in the future, and also that the baton gets picked up by more faculty across more departments as well on the research front.
Perfect.
Can I add one more?
Yeah.
So, sorry, Andrew. The other thing is, Pitt also needs to look at itself and its operations. And of course, I know we're doing that very much, but I mean, are we doing the best we can in terms of composting, in terms of recycling, in terms of all of those things, in terms of getting electric buses and shuttles and motivating our folks to live closer, use bicycles or scooters, electric scooters, or whatever, so that all, in small ways. And I know that CB has written a lot about this, the small things that make a big difference. We need to also be looking at that as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Provost. So Andrew, over to you from the community perspective. If you had a wish, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see from the center 3 years from now? What would we be celebrating?
So I think the key would be a community of practice that is driving meaningful change in whether you want to call it decarbonization or it's, and I see this again to the Provost's point, not just the center, but also Pitt has a range of sustainability programming, which covers a lot. So, and just parenthetically, my first tour of duty on the Heinz Endowments. I processed the grant that endowed the Mascaro Center 23 years ago. So we care about them too. But the upshot is driving a community of practice that drives meaningful change in the environmental and social externalities we're experiencing now.
Awesome. So audience, just as a heads up, we have one more pre-prepared question. At that point, it is actually engagement time. So we want to get the blood flowing here. We realize that we're in that kind of afternoon slump, food coma moment. So please do have your questions ready for the illustrious panel. The last magic wand, especially given this following question, the last magic wand question will have kind of similar route would be, what if you had a magic wand, given all of the stakeholders you've asked the center to be engaging with, given the stakeholders that are gathered here, some of them from academia, some of them from local governments, many of them from local, regional, global businesses, what is your wish? How would you use the magic wand? What is your call to action of the audience gathered here locally and on the live stream?
Well, I think if I had a wish that I could just sweep, I would like to have a policy U-turn on our federal energy approach. And I think that is going to be the critical turning point for all of this, because so much of what we do is driven by the federal government policies and practices that then filter down to the states, sometimes partially filter down to the local government. But that funnel of citizen investment in government funding is not going to be effective as long as we are carrying the ball and chain. And I visualize the Scrooge carrying his burden. We have to sever the tie with the past and fully embrace the opportunities of the future. The job report for Pennsylvania that we did with the Reimagined Appalachia Blueprint, which is all clean energy jobs, including eco-industrial parks on former coal sites, predicted 243,000 jobs in 5 years with a $26 billion investment into the communities. And I looked just now at the regulations from the IRS and Treasury Department about distributing the Inflation Reduction Act dollars. In order to be a qualifying energy community, you have to have an energy facility in your town since 2009. So most of our communities are affected with the back effects of things that ended in the 70s and early 80s. So we aren't even eligible. You can imagine I have pages of comments going in on this regulation, and I'm asking any of you who can to follow the implementation process of these very forward-looking legislations that have passed, but how they are implemented according to the current chain of command leaves out the most needy and the most potentially effective communities that are designed to build a shared prosperity. If we're going to get there, we have to use a different system than we've used in the past.
Thank you.
Wow, I think that's a tough act to follow. So So I just want to say, no, thank you for all of your engagement on this. And I just want to say to everyone here, engage on these issues and engage with the Center for Sustainable Business, where you see that as an opportunity. Engage with our students. Our students are always looking for challenges. I know that our students are amazing. They're very full of energy and they come up with amazing solutions. So where you can, engage with us.
Thank you.
I'll make a slightly more specific wish, and that's that we create let's create a well, 3 years from now, we'll have a sustainable transformation lab that will bring together students, faculty, companies, and business to work on specific areas that we want to see transformation and have an impact on them. Maybe the area is energy, for example. We bring together. I'm agnostic onto the topic. I'm still learning about the community and what we really need to do here. But having some center that brings together the confluence of interest and talent with the issues that we're trying to resolve to try to speed transformation in this community. That's what I would wish for.
Love it.
That was a wish, not a want.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we recently had a former head of the Urban Redevelopment Authority interview about 40 economic development practitioners between Eastern Kentucky and say Johnstown, the Ridgelines. And, looking at what are the opportunities now with all these federal resources here. And what we're finding is there is a thin pipeline, particularly in a number of the areas around renewables and other activities. And there's an issue around capital absorption for not all, but some of these federal resources that have come through. And we have work to do to create the infrastructure necessary to access the infrastructure money, and also to create that pipeline and deal flow, because it will go somewhere, and it certainly doesn't have to come here. So for me, looking 3 years or so down the road, I really hope we are able to absorb the available capital and build on the transformation that is possible in the region.
You have no idea how apropos that is. We've actually just been having conversations about various finance folks and quiet quitting their net zero commitments and what we can do about that. So I did promise that this is where audience engagement really peaks in. So you will notice there are 2 mics. And so hopefully some thoughts have been percolating. So if you want to go ahead and step up to the mics. Yeah. Oh, mics around. Okay. Okay. We have student mic runners, maybe? Yes? Okay, good. We have student mic runners. Mic runners. Okay, so who's got a question for our panel from different perspectives? What do you want to know? What would you like to see? What would you like to have the center mandated to do? Hey, the floor is yours, good audience.
Is this working?
Yep, we can hear you.
So I'd just like to ask a general question. How important do you think decreasing consumption is towards sustainability? Because while sustainability is good, if we continue with things like single-use plastics and we don't make a real commitment towards reducing our waste as consumers, especially in such a consumer-driven economy, then I can't really see how we're going to actually get to sustainability.
So before I hand it over to them, we actually just had a conversation on this upstairs in the Sustainable Business Forum. So we could go on, like I said, for another 3 hours on that synthesis. So stay tuned for some of the insights from that one. But from the panel, thoughts here?
It's clearly part of the overall decarbonization process is reducing throughput of single-use, unrecoverable material. And we are in a plastic crisis, and the world seems to be producing more and more of it, not less. So only about, as you probably know this better than I, about between 10 and 15% of single-use plastics ever get recovered in any way. So we have an issue there, but it's not just plastics. So, but all consumption is not equal. So ratcheting back overall on consumption, I think there's the consumption that really is doing harm that needs to be prioritized. And I don't have the answer as to how we do it, unfortunately. But I do think it is a very necessary topic. I will say that European countries do it a lot better than we do. Anyone who's traveled in Germany knows they are very aggressive about recovering waste and using it one way or the other. And we're not there yet. Our municipal recycling program, Act 101, has been around a long time, has not been updated for a long time. There's a lot more we could do, particularly looking at some of the models in the EU.
I think waste is built into the way we do things here from at least post-Second World War forward, the convenience of single-use, disposable, everything. And we have to reverse that. And I think the key thing to making that successful is creating the markets for the recovery of materials that are used and now and thrown away. And then the second step of that is having people design things to be recovered. I've been talking to a company in Turtle Creek who is ramping up from 250 people to 700 shortly. And they are designing a battery system based on an aqueous electrolyte, zinc, and boron, all of which can be reclaimed at the end of the customer service life and reprocessed and reused, designed from the beginning to do that. That's where we have to get to in order for this to work. Passing the national bottle bill wouldn't hurt either. Good luck with that.
Yeah, if I could just quickly put in a plug for our circular economy work that we're doing with Covestro and others and through Mascaro Institute. It's a really important program.
Anything? Yep. Okay. Yeah, we will have way more on that point. Watch for the outtakes from the Sustainable Business Forum. There was a lot covered over the last 24 hours on that front. And the idea that waste is a human invention, it only exists among us. Nature doesn't really know about it. But it looked like I saw a couple of other folks. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So household emissions constitute about 30% of worldwide emissions. So I'm just curious if there's a way that you've thought of for the university to help their employees and students reduce their own personal emissions in their lives, like an employee benefit or something like that, in that way.
No, I have not thought of that. And that is a great idea. And I'm guessing, though, that Aurora Sherrard has thought about this. And I look forward to a proposal coming to the senior leadership team. Thank you. That's a great idea.
I've actually had to deal with that problem because consumer household consumption is about 60% of our emissions in our climate plan. And I have found that the biggest barrier we have is communication to the citizens when we don't have a newspaper that covers it. They don't have a common radio station. And I don't want to get involved in the social media as a way of communicating policy. I think tweet is a long mode for doing that. Sorry. So we did have a group of graduate school public and international affairs students working with our community last spring. And they developed an outreach program for us. And they did 3 case studies by interviewing community members who had adopted solar with an electric charging car and an old house, namely mine, built in 1936, which, you know, there's no way I'm ever going to put solar on that house, but they outlined what you can do and what the savings are. That's where I talked about hitting the wall, because at some point I'm going to have to replace my gas furnace with an air-to-air heat pump. Okay, I've priced it out 3 different times and the price is coming down, but it's nowhere near in reach for the average household. So it is going to be a combination of information and making this something that people feel is important. Right now, they're worried about gasoline prices to put in their car, and that's the barometer for successful energy policy. It is absolutely the wrong barometer, but the public has no good understanding of energy issues and the complexity of it. And when we were building our net zero borough building, I had to spend a lot of time one-on-one teaching the council members so that they would understand that this isn't a completely wacky idea that was going to send them into the red. We're now a AA bond rated community. So it works. It really does. But the communication is the tough part.
I think, Jim? And I will say from the center side, we do have a number of resources tagged. Usually most of the resources are business oriented. There are a number of individual, like as an employee, what can I do and things like that. Also from the personal consumer perspective as well. So if you just go to the website and look under the resources tab, you should see a starter list there, and we look to build on that over the next 3 years.
I think in addition to individual behavior change, we need some policy change. And for instance, there's years ago, when the Pennsylvania energy sector was deregulated, Philadelphia Electric Company got a poison pill put into the final rulemaking that says if you want to put up a solar array and sell the electricity to your neighbors or to the rest of your family, and you're all in a fairly confined geographic area, you have to get a state license as a energy generator, and you have to file a lot of paperwork, post bonds, have fiscal capacity, and a lot of plans. And it was done deliberately by Philadelphia Electric, the largest utility in the state, to keep people like yourselves from getting their own energy. You can do it on your rooftop. And for instance, we are, along with the Benham Foundation and the Mellon Foundation investors in the Hazelwood Green development, we have the largest single sloped array anywhere of solar energy anywhere in the country. And it powers our facility. But the minute we try to sell it to anybody else, we got to pay Duquesne Light their backsheesh to move it across the street. And it's not cheap. So we need a community solar bill desperately so people can have community solar. Our advanced energy portfolio standard was signed by Governor Ridge, and I worked for Governor Ridge for a while. It was a very long time ago. It only requires 0.5% of our electric grid to be solar. It's 23 years out of date. So, I mean, there's a lot of policy change we need, and the residents of this community could help drive that. The bills are out there to make these changes. They're just not passing.
Thank you. Appreciate it, panel. I saw a couple of other folks who looked like they were chomping at the bit to ask a question. I saw some other hands around. Yep.
Hello, and thank you for addressing us today. So I was in yesterday's SBF forum as well, and a topic that stuck to my memory was one of change management and how in order to deploy a sustainable policy, you also need people who aren't resistant to change. That being said, all of you are leaders in the Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania community. How do you see Pittsburgh and its predisposition towards sustainability? Are we resistant as a community to change? And what does the future of that look like if we are?
Okay. Oh my goodness. I think I did a focus group for my book about that very question, about why people don't accept the reality that climate is a very urgent and compelling issue. And it was a pretty mixed group of 20 people. I was selected, I had to go through the whole IRB process to do a focus group on climate because it was seen as threatening. So we had a teacher, I had a school bus driver, I had a plumber, I had a person who was unemployed, but had been an engineer at one time, but got drunk and, he was recovering. So I had a pretty mixed bunch of people. And they really said that they don't see an effect of climate on themselves, and that they wouldn't make a change until they saw it as something that affected them personally, immediately and urgently. And then at that point, they would want to know what they needed to do. So it's like, the parable of the guy who has a king and the pond is their total sustenance. And someone comes to him and says, there's an algae invading our pond that doubles every 10 minutes. And he said, well, how much is it covering now? He said, well, it's covering a quarter of the pond. And he said, well, tell me when we have half done. He said, you now have 10 minutes to solve a problem. That is what we're doing in our country. That's why we need a policy U-turn. If you look at the projections of the UN IPCC 6 report, from where we are now, with the commitments in the Paris Accord now, even if they were fully implemented, we wouldn't make 1.5. We would be at 3 or 4. I came from one of the global climate convergences that the UN held in the last summer, over the summer. I was in the one in Frankfurt, and I listened to 6 climate experts who study research climate, realize what you get in the final report is the consensus document. These people were sharing their basic observations and research. No glacial sea ice on either pole by 2030. And, it just goes on from there. I cried for 2 days. So when people change is when they see the urgency, and what you get from the general information through the media and any other way is that, well, this isn't our problem. I mean, we're fine. I mean, we can still buy gas for $3 a gallon or $4. It's been 11 or 12 equivalent in Germany for a long time. We are not getting messages as consumers or as general citizens about the urgency of the situation. So as academics and people who are in leadership positions, we have to be a lot more vocal about, climate change is calling my name. I wrote a blog about that based on Marcia Dinkin's sermon on the subject. She's one of the Reimagine Appalachia leaders. It is really urgent that all of us take this seriously and take it home to your family, to your uncle who doesn't agree with you on anything. Talk about it. Because if we keep it among, oh my goodness, the data getting worse and worse and worse, what are we going to do? Wringing your hands does not solve anything. Getting out and accosting people. I mean, I give, street theater in the grocery store. Okay. You're talking about plastic. So they started putting eggs in plastic containers. There were no cardboard containers to be found for a long time. So I started bringing my own cardboard container and transferring the eggs into that and scanning the proper price with my scanner and putting the plastic one open on the shelf. Well, I was buying 3 dozen eggs on purpose for other people so I could make a case on this. So the manager comes up to me and he says, what are you doing with my eggs? And I said, why are you putting them in something so toxic? And these were styrofoam cartons. And then I now had about 5 or 6 people around me. So I started talking about how urgent it is that we not continue polluting the world with plastic and how the energy system is being destroyed, et cetera, et cetera. I will give a speech at any time without provocation, but you can all do this. I make my students do this. So heaven help you if you ever come in my class. Go find a way to communicate with people who don't want to hear you. Find a way to find common ground and make this real to people. Because until it's real, it isn't going to happen.
So Pittsburgh and the environment. So there are literally reams of books written on this. The late Sam Hayes of the University of Pittsburgh, Joel Tarr of Carnegie Mellon, who retired 6 months ago at age 87. They've written a number of histories of Pittsburgh and the environment. And it is how do you want to say, it's we have the best and the worst on environment in many ways. We have some, there are only about 30 living buildings in all the world. We have 2 of them here in Pittsburgh, and the only one that's open to the public. For years, we had more square footage of LEED certified buildings in inner city. We got passed a while ago, but I mean, considering Pittsburgh's geographically a relatively small city, and half of it you can't build on anyway because of the hills and the valleys. So there's some real sustainability accomplishments here that are quite extraordinary. But I mean, there is an entire geologic epoch called the Pennsylvanian when coal was laid down. And we are the carbonaceous state, and there's still an immense amount of carbon pollution disproportionate to our population here. And so we have a ways to go. And so, yeah, it really is sort of, we have the best of some things, but we don't have the best of other things. And it's very divided and fractured. Talking about fracturing and how fractured the region is, we have a lot of fracturing around the environment still.
CB, it looks like you have the mic for the last question.
Yeah. So since we are in multiple kind of fora, I guess, so we have a question over via Zoom from our dear colleague Elise Boyas at the business school. And she says that corporations are focused on using scarce capital resources efficiently to maximize shareholder wealth, and the costs of external pollution are not borne by the corporation. Last week, The Economist suggested that the only way to align corporate goals with society goals is to levy a tax on corporations. For example, a corporate carbon tax based on scope 3 carbon emissions. Do you believe we have the political will to do this? Are there other ways to align the interests of corporations and their owners with global sustainability goals?
Well, I'll take the first swing at that. It's a tough question. So clearly a policy decision has been made on this now, and it's that we're going to use incentives, the tax code, substantial federal investments to try and achieve those goals and not do it through either regulatory policy or taxation of carbon. I mean, I think for 30 years or more, economists have been telling us that a carbon tax would be the most efficient way to get the problem solved. And, some no less than George Shultz and James Baker and other sort of grand gentlemen of the previous generation came out in favor of one. And I think economically the case is pretty solid. But again, for years we funded something called the John Heinz Center on Economics and the Environment in Washington, D.C., thinking if we got the economics and we got the science right, the policy would follow. And it didn't. As we like to say in my shop, the ketchup never came out of the bottle. And the primary reason for that is that there's simply too much institutional gridlock in our democracy to make it happen. So clearly the Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Act, CHIPS Act, et cetera, have all decided we're going to try something different, which is incentives. And that gets back to our previous discussion of, can this region absorb that capital, apply it meaningfully, and decarbonize?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I'll stick with that.
Mic drop. All right. Perfect. Well, in the interest of letting the conversation continue in more microcosms, we do have, I believe, 15 minutes of networking time built in here. There are, if anyone does need caffeine, this guy, there is caffeine in the back of a variety of types. There is other hydration back there as well. I know that some of the panelists will be able to stick around before some other commitments they have to dash off to, presidential or otherwise. But with that, if the audience, if you could all help give a round of applause for our panelists today. All right. So with that, we'll resume our next panel. So you heard CB talking a bit about the applied research that we do, a bit about the educational experiences that we do. And one key piece of that is the collaboration that we have with a number of companies on taking on some fellow to work with them on a specific project, specific program that is going to really help them on some strategy issue for their business in their space, more specific than what the Sustainable Business Forum would be able to provide. So with that, first up, Dr. Martha Collins from Harbison Walker International, one of our most recent ones from over the summer that we helped had a fellowship complete. Could tell us a little bit the 3-sentence, 15-second, whatnot, elevator pitch, like just so folks who may not have heard about Harbison Walker before, what is that space, and why in the world did you all think like, hey, what was a fellowship? What were you looking to get out of the experience?
Okay, 15 seconds. Harbison Walker actually is more than 150 years old. We've been started really in Pittsburgh. We sell refractories, which are linings that go inside very high temperature furnaces for many, many industrial processes. Number one being steel. So you can imagine why we're a Pittsburgh home. And we just got started on our sustainability journey. And one of our big questions was really understanding our customer focus and what our customers are looking for. You know, we're scope 3 for them in a lot of ways. So how else could we make a difference to impact our customers' journey in what we sell is actually very consumable. It gets used and pulled out and discarded. But it's a ceramic material, so very, very highly engineered. Anyways, that was our big question. And we're really happy. At some point, we'll talk about what Aman did, but giving us really a roadmap on how to work with our customers, very strategic, and we're going to take full advantage of it. He did a great project for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know we'll circle back around to that one and we'll also get Aman's perspective on it. First, pass it on to Robert. From Robert, from the Ingevity perspective, it's hard to believe it's been more than a year now that Ingevity and the center have been collaborating. I know that we got together from one of our other member companies. Shout out to William Sapone with helping facilitate that introduction. But what, Robert, what helped bring Ingevity and the center together? What was it that was really kind of that you were looking for from a business? Like, this is why we should collaborate with someone in academia.
So just to this is working. Just well, thank you for having us here and for everyone being here as well. Just 2 seconds on Ingevity. We make basically activated carbon. Our activated carbon is on every gasoline vehicle on the road in the U.S. today. It's in the fuel integrated into the fuel system so that you don't have gasoline vapors escaping into the atmosphere. We save the planet about 3 billion gallons of gasoline a year. That application is also relevant for natural gas vehicles, and we have what's called the New Fuel vehicle platform, and that is essentially enables a fleet to fuel or enables a fleet to fuel their vehicles with natural gas off their commercial utility line for about $1.20 a gallon. It's a low cost fueling appliance, but really most impactful and most relevant to this discussion to integrate the use of renewable natural gas at no incremental cost and bring one of the more impactful and optimal sustainability pathways for fleets, and it's applicable for light duty trucks and school buses, et cetera. When we first got involved with the CSB, we had sort of a vision about what it could be, and it actually was. And that's how you go into something, but how it works out is sometimes different. And this was really exactly what we hoped in terms of the experience, in terms of the alignment, and in terms of the education and knowledge and awareness that we were hoping to bring, and the integrity and the credibility that we were hoping to bring to the program, as well as our communication into the world around ESG and sustainability. Did I answer the question sufficiently?
Yep.
Okay.
Good. We're good there.
I'm just a fellow, by the way. This is my boss. And Mel was this is our fellow. He was terrific, and thank you for all your work.
Awesome. So with that, maybe we'll pivot to the fellows and then we'll circle back to our company folks to see like, okay, great. The fellows delivered something. What has been the impact to the businesses? So Mel, start with you first. What was the experience for you? Any reflections on why you signed up? Was there a bait and switch with what we delivered in the experience versus what you thought you were going to get? How was it collaborating with a company in this way versus other options you might have had on campus?
Right. So I applied because my background, like I felt like it was pretty relevant to what Ingevity was looking for. I am a chemical engineer. I had internship with GIZ in their transfer project in the Philippines about transportation and cleaner Asia, about pollution from the transport sector in the Philippines. So that's probably like my most relevant skill and experience that I brought when I applied. And the experience really was very eye-opening for me. Where I am from, we are not there yet at the level of natural gas in cars. So like we're far from it. So here, being able to see how advanced US is compared to the Philippines, where I really come from, it just opens a lot of ideas for me to be able to share it with people from back home. And what I realized doing this entire fellowship with Robert and with the other folks from Ingevity really was there is a company that exists, or there are companies that exist like Ingevity, that their entire philosophy is built on the entire business model sits on a philosophy of waste to value, which is like mind-blowing for me. So there are really companies who are like that, and it's I would say it's profitable. It's very important, and it's very relevant in this fight for climate change. And for me, that was like what impressed the most in this entire fellowship experience. And that you can really create value from waste. So instead of just throwing them, you create something that's valuable, and not only valuable, but also helps in mitigating pollution, like Robert mentioned.
Perfect. Thank you, Mel. And so, Aman, I know that when we go ahead, pass it over. I know that when we recruited you, like, hey, so we have this opportunity to work with a mid-cap, small, medium business, right? They're in industrial space. You're going to help pilot that effort, because beforehand we'd had the fellows only with the large companies. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be piloting the space lining work. And oh, and by the way, we're going to be piloting some of this climate core type of work. So there was a lot of innovation, we'll call it, associated with that. So what was it about the fellowship for you that attracted you to it? How did it feel going through it? Was there a bait and switch? I know that there were lots of roller coasters along the way. So what drew you to the fellowship, and then what maybe some reflections on the fellowship?
All right, so thanks for the question. To me, there isn't really a large company or a small company. It's just more agile or less agile. And I found that, Harbison Walker was a Pittsburgh company. I love Pittsburgh, and I want to give back to my community, even after I've graduated. When I found out that Harbison Walker was also a legacy company, it seemed like a good fit. And yes, they have been in business for a long time, but they have to be one of the most open-minded companies that I've ever worked with, because even though I was an outsider to the refractories business and I had a lot to learn, it was Ben, my mentor, and Martha, who accepted the outsider's perspective. Even if I was telling them things that they already knew, there'd be one question that I asked that would be something new that would kind of recontextualize things. And they were very open to giving me the time to ask that question. And I've worked in a lot of manufacturing environments, and I'm very comfortable there. And so, sitting in on all of HWI's meetings, understanding what their process was like, what their procurement strategy was like, all I could think about was, okay, how do we optimize from here? And it really helped that they were willing to take that next step to become more sustainable. And like you've said, it doesn't matter how you put your socks on, where you start. All that matters is that you start. And HWI was more than willing to start, and I think they have. So thank you, Martha. Yeah.
Perfect. And that'll bring us back full circle back to our corporate colleagues one more time. So now that your respective fellows have completed their fellowships and delivered the final presentations, delivered the final sets of insights, white papers, microsites, what has been the impact? How is the company different now that the fellow has wrapped up? Some of us are continuing collaboration and looking at having the next fellow starting. But after the first one, how is your company different from the experience?
Well, number one, we'd do it all over again. So I think that's probably a good A+. At the end of Aman's project, where he interviewed all over the company and talked to everyone, I think, he delivered kind of a final recommendation and roadmap for us for how we would set about for the next 5 years to work with and accommodate our customers, really to delight them. We had all of technical marketing. I run a sustainability council. I work for our CEO. And so everyone on the council participated and took in really the delivery of a great recommendation. And in fact, we'll be using it for years to come, I think. And he did a really great job. Some of it, he reaffirmed what we sort of thought, but getting that outside perspective that was rather agnostic was really important. So if anyone's thinking about doing this, I would really recommend it, highly recommend it. So
awesome. Thank you, Martha. Robert, for you, how is Ingevity different? How is New Fuel different now that Mel completed the initial round?
Well, it was transformative. And I don't know if Mel could really appreciate it, because when we first started the program with him, we were just adding RNG into the platform as part of the value proposition. And the more we dug down And I think the more work we did, and Mel was part of that, the more we recognized the opportunity that we had to provide that sustainability pathway. And it really evolved into being an add-on part of the value proposition to the lead of the value proposition. And ultimately, during Mel's tenure, Ingevity had actually gone out and acquired an operated an RNG supplier. So I don't know if it was a result of his efforts, but just having work done and having the conversations brings it to a higher level of consciousness and really helped the program significantly. And it's one that we're very proud of.
Awesome. Thank you. We're going to leave the mic up here for a moment because we are going to circle similar to last time around. You might be noticing a trend. I will give you a little heads up that we are going to be opening an opportunity for audience Q&A for folks. First, though, both Mel and Aman have completed a fellowship with the center and with their respective companies. We are very grateful that we have an additional new crop of fellows here for the academic year ahead. So we won't get too much into the research. We're going to save that for cocktails. If you want to know what they're researching on, come up and ask them during that. Zishan and team, if you all would mind grabbing the mic and just a quick round for the rest of the room. Why did you all step up to be a fellow through the center this year? Why was it an opportunity you were looking for versus any of the number of other opportunities that you have on campus?
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Guys can hear me. So hi, my name is Zishuan. My undergrad was in environmental science, so I learned that for 4 years. And every time my friend asked me, so what did you learn for 4 years? And all I can remember from that 4 years of experience and also growing up in an oil industry city, I can always feel that I was always afraid and also feeling kind of despair of how environmental exploitation and also climate change can affect our planet. So by joining CSB, I'm really looking for the opportunity to combine my knowledge, which is in marketing science, and also my passion is in environmental science together, and really to play my part in this new green revolution. And referring to Professor CB's new book, like Small Action and Big Difference, I'm really trying to help my fellow company and to make small actions, and hopefully it will grow bigger later in the future.
Perfect. Thank you. Vishal?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vishal. So prior to my MBA, I had a couple of years of experience as a digital transformation consultant. And I realized that moving forward, if companies really wanted to transform themselves, it would not just be digitally, but they would also have to take into account a lot of other factors like sustainability. And so with this experience, I wanted to learn how could I help an organization. So my company that I am doing the fellowship with is ANSYS, which is a simulation organization. So it has a lot of digital components. So how can I bring in that perspective and also allow them or help them, incorporate the ESG baselining and other initiatives that they are doing, and in the process learn how could I, combine both so that in a year's time, I am a more developed consultant, which brings in both of those perspectives.
Cool. Thank you. Spandan?
Yep. So hello all. My name is Spandan Ghosh, and currently I'm the fellow for Console Energy. So what actually prompted me to take up this opportunity was I have about 6 years of experience when it comes to the supply chain industry. And towards the end, definitely during COVID as well, I had customers coming to me and asking me that, what can you do to achieve our sustainable goals? So that was a question that I often got. And when I came here, the Center of Sustainable Business was quite a unique proposition for us as students, because we not only get the opportunity to work with the company, but also try to integrate what we are learning in our day-to-day academia. So maybe when we are taking up marketing, we sort of integrate what we are learning through our experiences through the fellowship. So that was quite a golden opportunity for me. And yeah, last 2 days have been great and sort of reflects the kind of learning that I wanted to get. And I'm just looking forward to the experience. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Karthiki?
Hello. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karthikeya. I am right now a fellow with Target. Before coming here, like I graduated back in 2017 as a chemical engineer. Then I've been working in strategy consulting for last 5 years, most of which was like helping my clients in decarbonizing their supply chain and basically forming a roadmap for them. So I came here. Luckily, I spoke with Professor CB, and like I sent my resume to him, and he was like that, you should look up this opportunity. And I was like, this is a perfect natural transition for me, and I will get to get a reason to just continue what I have been doing. And so far, everything has been like very exciting. I can't wait to like get this thing started in full pace. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. And I'd be remiss if we didn't ask our photo man, Z, about his fellowship experience as well, why he signed up.
I'm not just photo man, sorry. So I'm Z, I'm the longevity fellow. So the main reason that I applied for longevity is that I do have a auto technician background. So I'm a super technician, and I do also do some engine mapping stuff. So also longevity has the marketing research stuff that really aligns my value and my background in the marketing research. So I'm also a focus on data analytics, and I'm more of a analytics guy. So I hope I can make some impacts for the company that can sell the product and to make more collaborations with other companies that can expand infrastructure. That's all. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Z. And I would be remiss if I neglected to say we actually had someone sign up for a double. One was not enough. I wanted to sign up for a second fellowship. So Aman, having already been through the experience once, what inspired you to sign up for yet another fellowship opportunity through the center?
I'm a bit of a logistics nerd, so I like Mid-Ohio a lot, and it was a bit of a specific project. So whereas HWI needed help building their ESG strategy, Mid-Ohio actually had a more specific project. They have a piece of land that they want to remediate and sort of, turn a liability into an asset, albeit through the lens of sustainability and innovation. So I wanted to see if I could do something, if I could go from broad to more specific. And that would be a real test of my skills, because you can consult for a client and you can tell them what's good, and you can tell them, oh, this is a long-term plan. But if you have to deliver on something tangible, that is a different beast altogether. So it's a new experience for me.
Awesome. Thank you. And with that, this is where we turn to you, dear audience. What questions do you all have for this next generation of the CSB? We've got a number of corporate collaborators, past talents, recurring talents. What questions do you have? This is that silent, awkward moment where I wait until we have a question. Yep. Up front from our friends in the county.
So this is probably a question for the students or the fellows. Seeing the potential projects that are out there that you're able to sign up for, do you see some gaps? Like, are there other types of projects or areas that you would like to see more opportunities for you to get involved in?
Well, honestly, the first thing that I thought to myself after I was done with my final presentation with HWI was that corporate sustainability is good, but individual sustainability is a lot better. And it would be very useful to go on a massive voice of customer. And when I mean customer, I mean everyday person exercise, and really understand how resistant people are to change. Like I said, change management is a huge part of sustainability. So I think doing something that's more customer centric is something that is super useful, because when you're working with a B2B organization, you often don't see that. So that's really something I want to explore. So that would be along the lines of marketing and customer analytics, but that is super important, I think.
Yeah, for me, because I've already been immersed a lot with the E part of ESG, the environment, I would like to see more social and governance projects, and not only here in the center, but really when people say ESG and sustainability, it also covers the S and then the G, and people tend to miss it because they say ESG is just environment, it's just climate change, but there's also social justice, there's also, equality issues. So I think like more of that from the center to the world, to tell the world that there is also S and G in your sustainability. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Great question. Hopefully that sparked other questions. The silent, awkward professor waiting moment.
I was an unpaid fellow for the at the center. I'm just picking up on Mel's interest in the S, and one of the projects. So I have actively been involved in two projects, and they were both actually on the S side. So one was to do with employee engagement in sustainability, and what could BASF. So that was sponsored by BASF, the large chemical company. They wanted a roadmap essentially to get their employees more engaged in sustainability. And then the other project that I was actively involved in was sponsored by Dick's Sporting Goods. And they were interested in better understanding kind of how to reduce the racial discrimination that exists kind of at the employee customer interface, because they're a high touch point retailer. And there are incidences, this is documented, so it's open knowledge, it's nothing secret, that there is discrimination. Sephora actually has a study on the internet available for everybody to read. So both of these projects were really interesting and fairly complicated. At that time, I think the idea of having a dedicated resource for the company was, came from Chris, to be honest. And so I realized that the E is dominating. We don't have the G at all. We don't have any project, I think, that's dealing with the G. But we certainly would, encourage other companies, to sponsor projects on the social side as well. Human rights, supply chain, labor-related issues in supply chain, all of those, modern slavery, all of those are excellent topics to deal with. And but I just wanted to make that point that we have had some projects, and I'll send you a bill.
And I do know that there is at least one startup in the room working on some governance aspects. So we're waiting for them to get up and going on their feet so we can begin more of those collaborations. But there's any one last question? We have time for one more from the audience. Oh, good. Everybody's set? Oh, we got one up here. Woo. We got to get the live stream, folks. There we go.
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about how you envision potentially aligning kind of academic experiences with the fellowship experiences as well? More of a formal academic experience, I think.
Sure. Yeah. And so that's one that I know, Mel, we had some conversations about that, and Amon was with that as well. So based on feedback from fellows and exploring with the current cohort, really looking at are there ways to do these as independent research study projects, right? How to do that in a way that is collaborative, that is academically robust. It's not just like, hey, you get a credit and you get a credit and you get a credit, but academically rigorous without adding yet another course that they need to complete. And so seeing if there's a way to do it that helps them with their degree programs and helps them flush out maybe, hey, if you had electives that you had to do anyway, if this helps you, rather than having yet more other classes, if this could be part of the class experience, that is one of the things that the center is looking for. So thank you for teeing that up, Melissa. Appreciate that. With that, unless there are any other ones, I know that we have a keynote. Wait, oh, Rick, yep. You got one more? Last question.
So just on both panels, I was sitting here thinking, one of the things that you might consider or something in the past is some type of playbook that could talk about all the different sustainability areas and then how they apply to governments, municipalities, private companies, and other, a lot of the people here are on board with what's going on, but it's those other ones. How do we get started? How do we get into these communities? How do we get to these companies? And I know Connect does that, and I've recently reached out to them, but I'm looking at something that can be used across the US.
Yeah. So coming up with that kind of playbook is definitely one of the things on our roadmap, how to help scale, but I don't know if there's thoughts. Yeah.
So I'm coming from a pretty small company and I've worked in very large companies through my career. And I would say excellent idea. And it was something I thought about bringing up, really how to get started, right? I was lucky. I got it going at my company, but I'd already had experience. And part of what I've been doing is trying to educate the company on what it means, right? Way down to the factory floor. What does it really mean? So I think that would be a really beneficial project for this center and definitely help the mid-size and the smaller companies that may not have those same resources.
As a recovering consultant and recovering in small, medium business, that is actually on our roadmap. So, and Lou, looking at you, Robert, you want to tap in?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we got out of the program, in addition to my previous comments, was not only a greater level of awareness, but also a greater level of credibility and robustness of information. That was really important. And while that carries sort of under the umbrella of CSB, being a research center, a think tank around ESG, it was really Mel's work that was instrumental in bringing that to a level where it was impactful for us as a program, and I think and I hope for Mel as a student, as a fellow. So it was really well worth it for us, and we're actually putting our money where our mouths are by having a second year and a second fellow work with us. So it gets a big endorsement.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's a rolling 5-year plan, CV.
There we go. There you go. All right. Well, audience, if you all give me a hand in helping thank our panel for sharing their experience with us.
So I think it seems as though what you're exploring today is a question of how has business changed over the last several years, and how might it change? Where might we go in the next few years? Okay. And I presume you've been exploring that a lot today, and these are great questions, and I appreciate your nodding your head, letting me know that I'm on the right track. Yeah, so I'm so glad to have the opportunity to be here to talk to you guys, and that you're exploring these things. The last several years have just been phenomenal. As I think we all know in terms of how the world is changing. We've got a number of things here. We've got the pandemic, we've got Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and then of course we've got the rise of China. And the rise of China as a global entity has really taken place in the last 10 years. But particularly, I think China has been able to take advantage of this time of the pandemic and also the Ukraine invasion. So they've become a bigger force. And that's actually the subject of my next book, which comes out in February, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, 3rd edition, China's economic hitman policy and how to stop the global takeover, which addresses these questions. First of all, if we look at the pandemic, pre-pandemic, it seems to me that the world really was headed in a direction of understanding these deep problems that we have. We were coming up with an increasing demand for B corporations, benefit corporations, things like the Green New Deal, conscious capitalism. These were on the rise big time. And I saw this when I was teaching at an MBA program in China. I saw it in Russia, Kazakhstan, all over Latin America, and of course, all over Europe and the United States. We saw a real recognition that the system that I helped create, which I like to refer to as a death economy, an economic system that's consuming and polluting itself into extinction, that's based on the idea of short-term maximization of profits for corporations and short-term maximization of materialistic consumption for all of us. We saw that these things were taking us in the wrong direction. We were beginning to see that and beginning to start to look at ways to change it. Then along comes the pandemic, and suddenly these sorts of things seem to have taken a backseat in some respects. In other respects, we've learned to do what we're doing right now. We still have some technical issues, obviously, but the fact that I'm sitting here on an island off the coast of Seattle, talking to you in Pittsburgh and or wherever else you happen to be listening from, is pretty phenomenal. And tomorrow I'm on a show with students from China, a program with students from China. Yesterday I was on a program with students from Hong Kong and the Philippines. I mean, it's phenomenal what we can do. At the same time, I'm looking out my window, and as I said, I'm on an island off the coast of Seattle. It's very, very smoky. Our air quality is terribly poor. It's at 156, and high is not good. And yesterday, Seattle was reported to be the most polluted city in the world. And today it's second after Portland, Oregon. We're not creating the pollution here. It's coming from fires that are further east of us, but we're feeling it. And the whole world is feeling this. We all know this. So I think the pandemic helped us recognize this. It helped us understand that we can communicate without flying around the world. We can have these kinds of programs. I think it also helped us understand that we can change, and we can even enjoy the change. And how many people that I've talked to recently have said that, you know, for the first time, they really had an opportunity to learn to play the flute or to read a book or write a book or whatever. And they learn that they can do these things. And we learn that we can benefit from change. As you may know, I've spent a lot of my life working with indigenous people in the Amazon and the Himalayas and elsewhere. I've written 5 books about that. One of the things that indigenous people teach is the ability to embrace change, because they know things are constantly changing in their lives. And they also embrace the idea of long-term benefits for everybody. And if we look at the 250,000 years or so that we've considered ourselves to be Homo sapiens, wise humans on this planet, we can see that in fact, most of those years we really were wise. We looked at the long run. We developed what we call today a life economy as opposed to a death economy. A life economy is an economy that's goal is to make the long-term benefits for all life, for future generations. And today we would see that as an economy that pays people to clean up pollution, to mine all the plastic floating around in the ocean and recycle it, to rejuvenate destroyed environments, to recycle, to develop new technologies that don't ravage the earth. And we've been moving very much in that direction. And again, the pandemic and now the war in Ukraine has set us backwards. But there are always, you know, an upward curve always has some downward steps backwards. So we're experiencing one of those now, and hopefully we'll move beyond this. So if we look at the past years, the really significant things, I think, are the knowledge that we were moving toward a life economy. We've had a little hiccup. I hope it's just a little hiccup. That's yet remains to be seen. We've seen China rise extremely rapidly. No other country has ever done what China's done. You know, 10% economic growth approximately for 30 years, brought more than 700 million people out of poverty. That's more than the rest of the entire world. And it's also done a lot of bad things, which we know. The Uyghurs, Taiwan, Hong Kong, South China Sea, on and on and on. At the same time, the United States is really taking some big steps backwards. Our economy is not doing well. The world kind of laughs at us like, what, are we really a democracy? I hear this all the time in Latin America and in Central Asia, wherever I travel. If the United States is a democracy, I don't think we want it, because you've had a president that just discarded all the agreements you had before. We can't trust you. And you've got a dysfunctional Congress today that can't seem to compromise on things. If statistically speaking, the real average wage, when you account for inflation in this country, hasn't increased since the 1970s. And the middle class has gone from 60% to 50%. Few of those people have gone up, but most of them have gone down. And so the world is kind of looking at us now and saying, you know, maybe the Chinese model is something we should be considering. And China's taken huge advantage of this. They're very good storytellers. They're economic hitmen, which is, I'm sure you know, that's what my job was. I was chief economist, but economic hitmen. Their economic hitmen have learned from our failures and our successes. And they're doing a very good job of convincing countries in Africa and Latin America, Middle East, Asia, all over, to take the loans from them, to replace us as the world's superpower. And that's where I think, to a large degree, Russia fits in. Russia is not a global power by any economic standards. It's probably not even a global power by military standards, although that could be debatable, but it certainly has nuclear weapons. It can be a huge threat. And Putin, who I actually shared the stage with when I spoke at a big, at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum in 2017 in St. Petersburg, Russia. And in those days, Putin was sounding quite reasonable, but he came to understand that China, this was a race between China and the United States, and he didn't like that, as well as the fact that the Soviet Union no longer existed. He didn't like any of that. So what were his alternatives? What were his options? He could be a disruptor and gain the world stage, and he succeeded. He's disrupted and he's gained the world stage. And I think it's extremely unfortunate for many reasons. There's the obvious of the terrible destruction that's happening in Ukraine. There's a terrible toll it's taking on the Russian people also. But beyond that, it's distracted us all from the real problem. The real threat to life on this planet as we know it is the death economy. And many of us would say, well, it's climate change, it's species extinction, it's income inequality. All of those are symptoms. They are problems, but they're not the problem. The problem is this economic system that's based on short-term maximization of profits. So what can you do over the next few years as you go out into the world or continue in the world to take leadership roles, to run businesses? It's really, really important that we change our perception of what it means to be successful as human beings and as businesses. When I went to business school, pre-1976, I was taught that a good CEO makes a decent rate of return for his investors and also takes really good care of his employees, gives them health insurance, retirement pensions, and takes really good care of his customers and his suppliers and the communities where the business operates. Helps to pay for recreational centers or new facilities for schools, does things like that. All that changed in 1976 when Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in economics. And Milton Friedman said some good things, but the worst thing is that he really was a proponent of the idea that the only goal of business is to maximize short-term profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. It wasn't a new idea. Von Hayek had won the Nobel Prize a few years earlier, saying something similar, but Friedman had the world stage. President Reagan loved him, Prime Minister Thatcher loved him, and leaders around the world, countries embraced this idea, and of course corporations did. So it became the mandate. And when you tell a corporation that their only goal is to maximize short-term profits, it gives them a mandate to do whatever that takes, including corrupting officials. And in the United States, we have a way of corrupting officials without actually doing anything illegal, because corruption in terms of supporting political candidates through corporate contributions and many other things has become legalized in our country. But it is a corrupt approach to politics and to other things, to stand in the way of our environmental protection, to constantly fight to keep many costs externalized, not to include costs of people's health care and deaths that occur because of poor working conditions or the environmental destruction. So as you move forward, I think having all these things in mind is important, and to know that the future belongs to leaders who will promote and support a life economy. And there's many, many ways you can do that. So what's essential here is that we all understand that although we are victims of the system that economic hitmen founded or promoted, this death economy, we are also collaborators. It exists, it succeeds because we buy from it, we invest in it, we work for it, and we can turn that around. We must turn it around. We absolutely must turn it around if we want our kids and grandchildren and those of all species to live on a planet that any of us would recognize. Something we all can do is, really start spreading this story of how we must turn things around, and spread that story with your local media, with your politicians, with your corporations. We can all have a huge influence on corporations. I can't begin to tell you how many chief executive officers I know and have talked to over recent years who've said things like, I want my company to be a lot greener. I've got children and grandchildren, but I know that if I lose market share or my stock price falls for a while, my top investors will fire me. And they'll replace me with someone who only cares about market share or stock prices. So I need you to help me. And they'll tell me, John, when you go out and speak to people in the world, say, hey, to encourage everybody to pick a corporation that you want to see changed, and write them a letter, make it nice, don't make them the enemy. Say, hey, I love your products, but I'm not going to buy them anymore until you pay your workers a fair wage, or clean up the pollution you've caused, or stop polluting, or whatever happens to be for that company. And send this to the CEO as an email or a tweet or however you want to do it, but also send it out to all of your social networking circles and ask them to send it to all of theirs. And obviously, corporate executives don't read all these things that come in, but somebody in their organization does. And somebody checks off a matrix that the CEO or chief financial officer, one of them, sees every week or every month, and they know. And so I've had so many of these executives tell me that the president of Nike is one of them, who told me, let me get, spoke out and said, let me get, when I get hundreds of thousands of these, I can take them to Phil Knight and our other top investors and say, hey, these are our customers. We've got to do what they're asking us to do. I can take it to Wall Street and say, we've got to look to the future. And so I would encourage all of you to really look to the future. How can you mold whatever you're involved in a way that'll help transform the death to a life economy? And on a personal note, and I'm running out of time here, so I'll make this fairly quick, but in my new book, I talk about 5 questions we can each ask ourselves. And I'm very quickly going to run through those and give a little example. So the first question, each of you, I encourage you to ask yourself this: what is it I most want to do for the rest of my life? What'll bring me the greatest satisfaction? And I would answer that by saying, I want to write. I'd love to write. I want to continue writing. I have a friend who's at the opposite end of the spectrum. He's a carpenter. He says, I want to work with my hands in wood. Second question, how do I do this in a way that'll help transform the death economy to a life economy? I say, I write about these things. I try to inspire people to do that. My carpenter friend says, I'll use only sustainable materials. Third question, what's getting in my way? What's stopping me? As a writer, I might say, well, I just don't have time to write every day. And I know I should write every day if I'm going to be a writer. My carpenter friend might say, my clients don't want to pay the extra price for sustainable materials. And so the fourth question then is, how do I change my mindset, my perception, so that I can change my actions? And for me, it would be, I'll take an hour off every night from watching television and devote it to writing. And my carpenter friend would say, well, I'll help my clients understand that they're not paying, their extra payment is not a cost, it's an investment in the future. And then the fifth question is, what actions do I take? So as a writer, I have to write every day. Some days I'm going to write things that I know aren't going to be published, but I got to keep writing, just like a concert pianist has to practice every day, even if not on the stage, or tennis player, even if they're not playing in a tournament, has to practice. Writers, whatever we do, we have to keep at it. So those five questions, what is it I most want to do for the rest of my life? How do I do it in a way that helps transform a death to a life economy? What's blocking me? What's standing in my way? How do I change my perception that it allows me to move beyond into a new perception that then allows me to do number 5, which is take daily actions to put this into place? And if you're going into business or you're going into politics or whatever you're going into, you can apply all of these to whatever you're doing and recognize that, you know, you can't do it all overnight, but it's really important that you do what brings you the greatest satisfaction. Burnout doesn't work, and trying to do something just because it seems to be what you've been taught you should do, that doesn't work either. I tried that, you know. I lived the American dream. I became chief economist at a big consulting firm. I was making a lot of money. I was traveling first class around the world, wining and dining with presidents. And I was living on Valium and alcohol at night and lots of caffeine in the morning. And I realized after a while, I might have been living what I've been told was the American dream, but I wasn't happy. I don't make nearly as much money now. I have kind of a very different lifestyle, but I'm really happy now doing what I most want to do. So I encourage you, and I want to just leave by saying, I think each of you should look at the fact that you live a very blessed time. It's a time of incredible crises and incredible opportunities. We are going through something like human beings have never been through before, a period of transition, and we've got to make it happen the way we know it will be best, not just for ourselves, but for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and those of all species. Go forth and enjoy. Be productive in a very, very good way. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So, John, one question from the audience is, how do we go about changing the mindsets of these corporate actors that have all these short-term pressures that you were referencing?
I think to start with, remembering that all of us, whether we're talking about Wall Street, whether we're talking about hedge funds, whether we're talking about these CEOs, they're all people. And it's true whether they're from China or Russia or the United States or wherever. And we're all recognizing today that we are approaching the precipice. We're about to fall off the cliff. And I think that's a good starting point. And then to recognize the power that you have as consumers and investors and workers or management to really continue to put pressure on these things. You know, we've made incredible changes over the years. If I think about during my lifetime, my goodness, I mean, even like 10 years ago, who would have thought that we would have made the progress in our gender issues, you know, same-sex marriages, transgender issues, and so on and so forth. And there's still problems around it, there's still discussions, but we've made incredible progress in that area. Never would have thought 20 years ago that there would be same-sex marriages and people could adopt children. That's a huge change. And, if we look at the incredible change that China made, and again, I'm not trying to justify all the bad things China's done too, don't get me wrong, but we can see how things can change so very, very rapidly. When I was lecturing at an MBA program in China, a very top one, the Chinese students there told me, we've created a miracle in China. An economic miracle. It's come at a horrible price environmentally and socially. But we created a miracle, and now we've lived with terrible pollution. We don't want our children to have this. We're going to become the greenest country on the planet. And we can do that because we can create miracles. I don't know whether they will do it or not, but I know they were sincere. And I'd like to, speak to American students and say, don't let them be the greenest. You be the greenest. Let's have a World Cup of which country can be the greenest in the world. We can accomplish incredible things as human beings. We've proven it over and over and over. We've come up against horrible odds and won out. My grandmother used to tell me, back when she was young, they thought World War I was the end of the world. Then the Great Depression was the end of the world. Then World War II was the end of the world. And they had a flu and pandemic in 1918 that they thought was the end of the world. But we made through it. We're going to make it through this, but let's not just wallow through it in the short term. This time, let's really look at the long term. How do we create a life economy? And that is the ultimate. So keep encouraging these executives, and as you work for companies, keep pushing to be greener, to say, let's be a leader in the future. Let's be a leader in the future. And it's going to be a hard line to walk, because you got to, at this point, please Wall Street too. But the important thing will be to bring Wall Street around to recognize that it is not just about the daily stock market or the quarterly report. They want to stand behind companies, and they're going to gain, and their investors are going to gain if they stand behind companies that have a long-term goal. And that goal is creating a life economy, an economic system that is itself a renewable resource.
Thank you, John. Do we have one last question from the audience? Yep, over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I wanted to know, who do you think, or which nation is leading the way in systemic environmental change for the better? So more precisely, which country is doing the things and not just committing to them?
All right. Thanks for the question. Well, there's a lot of smaller countries that are doing a lot of things. I teach every year in Costa Rica. They're doing a lot. There's a lot of European countries that are doing a lot. There's many countries that are doing many things. But I think what's important to understand at this point is that China and the United States together are responsible for almost 50% of the world's economy, if you measure it as GDP. They're also responsible for almost 50% of the world's pollution. And while China creates more pollution than we do, its per capita production of CO2 is only about 7 tons per person, while we're 14 tons per person. But because they have a much bigger population, their overall is greater. I just recently read an article in the New York Times that China has reduced pollution in the last 7 years more than the United States did in the last 30 years. So I think what's really important here is for us to recognize that although we can disagree on many aspects, we can disagree about we can criticize them for Taiwan and Hong Kong. They can criticize us for Iraq and Afghanistan. We can criticize them for the Uyghurs. They can criticize us for immigration policies in the United States. And yet, ultimately, if these two countries don't come together to agree that we've got to end climate change, we've got to end the death economy, we've got to compete on a level that isn't about short-term maximization. If we can't do that, if we can't come together, if each of these countries can't take a real leadership role in that direction, we're in trouble. And so we can learn from a lot of these smaller countries, Finland, Costa Rica, and many others that are really implementing amazing programs in so many areas of alternative energy and other aspects of the life economy. We can learn from all of those, but we've got to understand that we have to take a leadership. And India is the other country that has to get deeply involved in this, I think, in taking this leadership. It doesn't have as much economic clout or military clout as China and the United States, but it has a lot of people, and it has a lot of influence in making these impacts. So let's face reality and stop arguing over the details and understand that both countries, China and the United States, are doing some things that none of us likes, but we've got to come together to transform the death economy to a life economy. It's a simple fact. So these are the two countries we need to focus on. Thank you.
I just spent 20 years living around the world in the UK, South Africa, and Chile, and recently returned to the US. And what you said that has happened recently around the perception of the world in respect to the US, I experienced, I watched. And my question from your perspective, your global perspective, and especially on China and the US, democracy is something that the US stands for. China's taken a different approach. How do we have the leadership of those two countries that are delivering this in a very different way come together to make sustainability work globally? How do these countries look to leadership, and where do you think it's going to win?
Well, those are phenomenal questions, Susan. I think we have to look at how after World War II, we created NATO, the World Bank, the IMF. The World Bank was extremely successful in its original goal, which was to rehabilitate a reconstruct a destroyed Europe. And for a long time, we've had relative peace on the planet. There's been all these smaller wars, which have been horrible. There's no question about it. But the major powers have been able to work things out one way or another. And I think right now what's needed more than anything is a common cause for China and the United States to move together, to stop bickering about things they're never going to agree with. We're not going to agree with China about Taiwan. They're not going to agree, and they're not going to agree with us about our ideas about Taiwan. And we're not going to listen to their ideas about how we should behave in places like the Middle East and elsewhere. So let's just let that go, but recognize that there's one thing we can really zero in on and work together, and that is to create an economic system that is functional in terms of being a renewable resource, a long-term life economy. Let's come together to cooperate to do that. It's not easy, and I actually think that the Chinese have an especially difficult problem, because they're dealing with a country, the United States, where a president has to be tough on China. And as long as President Biden or President Trump or whoever the next president is identifies China as the enemy, it's pretty hard for them to negotiate with us or talk with us. At the same time, we find it hard as they continue to rattle their sabers in the South China Sea to negotiate with them. So I don't know that the current leadership is ever going to be able to work their way through this. And that's why I look to you, I look to the people who are on this call right now to see that the next generations in both countries, I think, understand the difficulties and the importance of overcoming those difficulties, of arriving at solutions. Look, human beings throughout history have threatened each other with war and then come together to fight a common enemy. I've watched in the Amazon how tribes since I was a Peace Corps volunteer there in 1968 to 71, tribes that were fighting terribly have come together to try to keep the oil companies out and to try to basically teach the modern world that you got to stop your dependence on oil. We are able to come together when we find a common cause, And I think we could say that if you were in a UFO right now looking down at this planet and threatening this planet, and we felt threatened by a UFO up there, by aliens, we would come together. So let's admit that we are the aliens. We have created an economic system that alienates us from the rest of the planet, alienates us from nature. We see ourselves as apart from, not a part of nature. So in a way, we're the aliens. So let's understand that China, Russia, India, all the countries of the world need to come together to fight the aliens. And the aliens is a human attitude that's destroying life on this planet as we know it. I'm not saying it'll be easy. It's a challenge, but what a great challenge. Susan, what a great challenge for you to face, for you to take on. And that's what I'm doing every day. And I love it. You know, I'm sorry that I have to do this. I'm sorry that this challenge exists the way it does, but I'm awfully glad to be alive long enough to be part of it. And you're probably going to be alive a lot longer than me, so you can be a bigger part of it. So embrace it and make it happen. And it can happen. We're just so capable of so many things. Remember, it's about changing the perception.
We're past when we booked you for. I know that you have many other students and audiences that you need to connect with around the globe. Thank you so much. We're going to continue on here with the local program. But again, John, thank you. Much appreciated. And with that.
But I wanted to share with you, we want to share with you some of the research that we've done at the center. And it has been an incredible pleasure for me to collaborate with Rob from Harrispoll. Rob has come here today from New York to talk to us about this research that we've done. Sustainability, as we know by now, is our license to operate. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. And we're talking about uniting against a common enemy. In this case, it was climate change. Always reminds me of the Game of Thrones situation, if some of you have seen that. Where people who don't like one another kind of somehow got together. And that's what we have to do. And sustainability is operated by different companies at different levels, all from compliance. Some say, okay, no, it's more than compliance, it's also risk reduction. Some say, well, it's not just all compliance and risk reduction, it's also opportunity generation. It's people are looking for sustainable products. But very few companies today are actually conducting business through the lens of sustainability, as I call it, where essentially the well-being of our planet and people are considered in every business decision that the company makes, the employees make on behalf of the company, from the mailroom to the boardroom. And it was my belief that this is something that is needed. We need all hands on deck, essentially, to fight inequality, to fight climate change, to fight hunger, all the environmental and social ills that we have going on. And so this sounds simple in practice, but there's of course one roadblock. And the roadblock is that sustainability, even today, is viewed as someone else's problem. So okay, we have Justine in our organization who'll do it, or we have a Chris or whatever. But I was fortunate enough to come across companies where it was everyone's problem. And one example would be Unilever. And this is PG Tips, a brand of tea. And a shop floor worker came up with the idea of snipping 3 millimeters off of the tea bag, of the paper of the package. And you might think 3 millimeters is not a whole lot. What's the big deal? But when you multiply that by the scale of tea bags that Unilever produces, it actually gives you a lot of, saves you a lot of paper, saves you a lot of money. But the point to note is that this came from a shop floor worker. So this shop floor worker was conducting business through the lens of sustainability. And the move was ultimately supported by the company. So this basically led to the book that many of you know. If you do not, please talk to me and we'll see what we can do to introduce you to it. But essentially, I went around the globe talking to lots of CEOs, C-suite folks, shop floor workers, the middle management, the lot, to figure out kind of how can we leverage sustainability? How can we make it everybody's job in the organization? Make sustainability everyone's job. And towards that end, so, okay, you've got to build a sense of ownership of sustainability. And, if we can endow this sense of ownership amongst our employees, then we will, they will take more action. And I've done work in that area and seen that, yes, indeed, it does happen. I came up with a model of sustainability in the book. And what we see there, so the model has essentially 3 phases. So you need to kind of define your purpose. You need to define some concrete goals, and that's the incubation phase of the model. Got to launch your sustainability plan to your employees. Got to use your head and heart essentially to entice them, to empower them to take actions on the sustainability front. And finally, there's the cultural piece where you entrench sustainability in the organization so that it becomes routine, it becomes second nature. And for that, we want to kind of demystify progress, kind of so share information on how much progress you're making, kind of enliven the culture, and collaborate with competitors, which actually was the theme of our big part of our meeting that we finished earlier today on the circular economy realm. So my book was on qualitative, all on qualitative interviews with more than 100, close to 200 perhaps, individuals across the globe. When I got in touch with Rob and we started saying, okay, what can we do together about this kind of, the next phase of sustainability? And the idea we came up with was, well, maybe we can actually do a survey of employees in the United States. Now, he's Harris Poll, so he has access to stuff that I don't. And he was kind enough to say, yeah, well, let's do this. And so what you will see today over this 3-year period, what we've been able to do, well, actual research happened quite recently, but we did a survey to figure out what is the state of play, what's going on right now with this kind of, our employees picking up the baton, in other words, where are companies with regard to cascading sustainability toward, throughout their employee base. And I will now invite Rob up to actually talk about the results of this study. And is it the same presentation that goes on, folks? Okay, so I'm skipping a bunch of slides to basically take you. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Rob from the...
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob from the Harris Poll. At a podium, I usually like walking around a lot. I know there's a camera, so I'll be kind of moving around a little bit. But yeah, so I think everybody probably knows the Harris Poll, recognize the name. We're a large polling market research company. We have a lot of expertise in a variety of areas. One of those is around corporate reputation. We do a lot of work around purpose, sustainability. So when CB and I have kind of intersected through different lives over the last 2 decades in one way, shape, or form. And so when we met through the conference board on one of the sustainability working committees, his book definitely hit a very unique chord. Right, because there's a lot of research out there. Actually, just recently we did work with, we published research with the conference board on sustainability, more from like a consumer perspective, where you can imagine a lot of right now there's a huge tug between kind of inflation and sustainability, right, as an example. What's really unique about this research is it takes the employee lens, and we're really trying to move from kind of the broad attitudinal, which there's a little bit, but into the behavioral, right? So we're really starting to understand the perspectives of how companies are acting. Right. And is that actually being seen by employees? Does it make an impact? Are they being empowered? So 4 things I'll hit on quickly. Kind of the sustainability, the state of play, right, is probably the number one thing where, again, the idea that definitely want to leave you with is basically the gap between the front line and corporate, right? Second one is around biggest roadblocks to address. We think there's something really interesting as you start looking at the kind of convergence and divergence between both kind of what's working and then what are the big roadblocks. And one of the big things you can see is that people who aren't engaged, who aren't actually seeing the benefits, who aren't seeing the actions, they're also not seeing the state of challenge, right? So you can see as you kind of move forward, a kind of double impact in terms of where to go. We'll talk about that in the context of 2 key kind of implications for employee engagement. We'll talk about just the implications, kind of 2 prongs for employee engagement, and actually a nice mini case. So looking at Target, and here we'll kind of bring in some additional research and just look at kind of sustainability and really connecting to both to things like corporate reputation, also to financial performance. This text is super small, so just at some point you'll get this. It's just an overview of the methodology. What it's telling you is that we talked to over 1,000 employees across America. Really good kind of composition of different industries and sectors they're representing. They play a lot of different roles. We kind of created a set of categories that are a good depiction of whether they're more kind of corporate, supporting corporate, whether more customer facing, customer service, frontline, kind of building, manufacturing. We also looked at a variety of different kind of aspects in terms of roles, right? We won't get too deep into this, like hybrid versus remote versus in office. And one of the key things we definitely want to be looking at is we looked at both kind of managers and non-managers, right? So people who are kind of coordinating teams versus being more of a frontline. One of the core frameworks that we're bringing to the mix, obviously, because it was built with CB, is the incubate, launch, entrench, right? Where it brings in some context. There's more data slides in here that I'll fly through some of them pretty quick as we unpack it. The first key takeaway is as you look at the state of current affairs, there actually is a fair bit of momentum, right? So you actually do see that 30% of employees are seeing kind of some positive behavior from companies across the incubate, launch, and entrench phases, if you will. But it's only 30%, right? So again, only 30%, which is there are, and in your minds, what we want to be thinking about is when you see in each one of these percentages, like it's a number, it could be a little bit abstract, kind of project it onto an organization or a company that you work for, the kinds of organizations or companies you're seeing across the country, right? And in particular, a lot of when I think of the impact of a lot of this work is how do you take those small behaviors and really kind of work through large complex organizations? So kind of multiply that by 100,000, by 500,000, by 1 million employees, right? Especially when you start looking at retail, you start getting into very large numbers. Okay. So when we get into looking at kind of the incubation gap, I'm going to hit some quick kind of points, and wow, my eyesight is not as good as it used to be. So the first piece around incubation is just a gap as you start looking at kind of integration into business strategy, right? That's the lowest feature or factor as we're looking at incubation. As we're getting towards more of the launch, right? As you get into launch, one of the key depictions is starting to see, like, as your employees are seeing what you're doing, where are new investments being made, right? Is it, so the first part around incubation, it's around, is it clearly defined and built into the business strategy? The second one is there's actually a number of very cool other factors, but the main one here that we're seeing is around kind of as you're making a new investment, right? And that's one of the places that's lacking. So again, as we're conversely looking at it, is one of the ways to actually create impact is by being able to showcase sustainability through new investments. As we start getting into the entrench piece, three of the factors that are actually lacking most are kind of being able to showcase how you're collaborating with other organizations, celebrating success, and one of the lowest kind of rated one, or the one that's least seen, is actually just on recycling, which we thought it's a super kind of like tactical. Some of these other features are a little bit higher order, but one of the lowest factors, and in terms of this being entrenched, is just the degree to which employees are seeing recycling and reuse of materials within companies. Excellent. So what we're hitting on kind of across the three phases is just some of the features that are kind of ranking lowest, and what are the biggest gaps to fill, right? So in our minds, what we're really looking at are which behaviors that are really key to basically getting things moving in terms of incubating, right? And then launching and then entrenching. What are the key factors that are really missing today, and where the biggest gaps are? So, and on this one, again, we'll highlight recycling, also celebrating success, right? As you're starting to think about this being entrenched in terms of cultures, one of the biggest gaps is that, right? As we're starting to think through how do we bring sustainability to life, a big part of it when we take the employee lens is it's not just that operational investment that we're making. A big part of it very much turns into, like, how is that actually being digested by the organization, right? And this is where roles like communications become incredibly important as kind of sustainability is being partnered through the organization. As we're starting to look at different kind of groups or segments, one of the things that you can see is a very substantial gap between different segments and their engagement around sustainability. Okay. hopefully this one's a little bit readable. As you're starting to look at some of the groups on top, if you're working in corporate, if you're able to work in a hybrid environment, if you're urban based, if you're a millennial, a parent, a manager, right, you're actually much more likely to be seeing behaviors, right? So again, think of 30% that being kind of all employees, you're getting closer to 40% if you're in one of those groups. Versus, in contrast to that, across all three phases, what you're seeing is that employees who are rural or suburban, working on site or in the office, aren't managers, and are supporting customers are substantially lower. Right. And one of the key takeaways from the study is really this. So when you think of sustainability, one of the biggest gaps you're seeing right now is very much around kind of that last mile. Right. Both in terms of employees kind of seeing the behaviors and the value of those behaviors. Right. So if I'm in corporate, if I'm a manager in more of an urban setting, you can think of it, you can picture the person, right? I'm 38% across all the behaviors. 38% are saying they strongly are seeing those apparent within companies. In contrast to that, if you're thinking of employees who are on the front line, working in customer service or support, or in much more of a rural or suburban setting, right, you're seeing a much bigger gap. It's only about 1 in 4. Right. So again, yeah.
38% by itself is not stunning. Stunning is celebratory statistic, right? That's something that we want it to be much higher.
I think you would want it to be higher, but to know that at any organization you have 38% of your organization that's kind of on board and are potential advocates is a huge asset, right? The problem is when you can very clearly picture exactly where some of those people are situated versus others, right? Very much manifests itself in terms of both kind of how relevant and important the issues are, and really in this case, how the behaviors are they apparent or not, right? Or can people clearly see that this is an idea that we're incubating? Is it built into goals? The answer is, if you're in corporate, kind of, right? If you're on the front line, not really, right? Same thing in terms of entrenching. So flip side of it, as we start looking at, okay, so we have a problem. We have 38% that are engaged. That's good. We have 25% of frontline. That's not that great. So what are the biggest roadblocks? So we also looked at a variety of roadblock factors across both the incubate, launch, and entrench phases. And here what you're starting to see is the actual level of challenge or percentage who are seeing roadblocks is substantially higher, right? So pretty low in terms of the percent that would say, yeah, these behaviors are very apparent in my organization. Much higher as we start looking at the level of roadblock across a variety of different factors. And pretty close to 50% kind of across the board. So as we're looking at the incubate phase, the two biggest roadblocks that stand out are around, again, just reinforcing this idea of them not being seen. Sustainability is not being built into our business strategy. Or employees just saying that sustainability is not a priority at my company, right? Those are two pretty substantial issues, and very much kind of speaking to when we think of sustainability, and I kind of skimped over this a little bit at the beginning. We use a pretty broad definition of sustainability. We certainly kind of reinforce it is environmental, but also looking at kind of social implications. If employees right now aren't seeing the manifestation of either social or environmental issues built into the business strategy, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to execute it. And it's also one of the key indicators of why the numbers are so low in terms of behaviors that are currently being seen within the company. Secondarily, as we're looking at launch, and entrench, these are probably kind of two of the core factors to really be thinking about. And CB set this up nicely when he was thinking about both kind of like heart and mind. So the number one kind of obstacle around launch is there are no incentives for improving sustainability performance at my company. Right? So again, that's the top feature. It stands out. It's at 50%, but it very much also starts reinforcing as we're looking at embedding sustainability in companies. It's not just a sustainability strategy. It really, really needs to be a business strategy, right? So the business not only has to set the goal, it has to have a really good business case for it. Right. Flip side of it, as you look at the entrench and what are some of the biggest roadblocks, the number one is our culture does not reinforce actions that improve sustainability performance, right? That's very much the heart. So as we're looking, as we went back a few slides in our mind and we're looking at entrench from kind of behaviors that are being seen or not seen, one of the lowest was there, like just celebrating successes around sustainability, right? So again, we're thinking both incentives hard and then looking at culture and celebrating as being that softer side. And both are very much required in order to build that momentum. So as we're looking at, again, some of the, as you start seeing the biggest differences in level of challenge kind of seen, one of the things that's pretty interesting is you look at the top group, it's not exactly the same, but you're seeing a lot of similarity to the group that was actually seeing most behavior in organizations, right? So those who are most engaged, who are actually seeing behavior most apparent within companies, are also seeing the highest level of challenge, right? And that's a very important learning. As we get going, people are going to recognize the size of the challenge, especially those who are already moving down the path with us. The flip side of that is, as you start seeing, as you look at the bottom, you're also seeing a lot of a very kind of similar face, if you will, right? And this is probably one of the key takeaways. So the people that are less engaged, seeing less sustainability behavior being pulled through the organization are also those who are less likely to say there's a challenge. And that thought really kind of drives us to this kind of two prongs of employee engagement in terms of implications, right? The first is, as we're looking at sustainability, although CB would say that 38% is not great, it's a lot better than the 25% who are on the front lines, right? That 25%, you can say, well, maybe some of these topics aren't as relevant to them. You also get a very clear sense that they haven't really been the priority. So first and foremost, it's around how do you reinforce the strategy for addressing frontline engagement gaps, right? And in particular here, part of it is messaging. How do you make it real, right? This is the most important piece. As you start looking at frontline workers, how do I make this really real? How is it built into our operations? How is it part of their kind of day-to-day job? You know, some of the other factors that we were looking at earlier on, we didn't talk about as much, are just, you know, how is this manifested through kind of engagement with managers, like specific individual incentives, training programs for individuals? Does it make sense? Is it really, is it entrenched in the business? Also, cascading via managers is not enough, right? If for anyone here who's working at a company and you're kind of relying on cascading through your managers as being like your number one strategy or your main area of investment, it's not going to work, right? You can see across the slides, you can see the big gaps. Maybe it's one of 3 or 5 things, but it can't be the only one thing. Secondarily, it's proactively preparing for roadblock realization, continuing to grow as engagement increases, right? As people actually start seeing more of the behaviors manifested and they get more interested and you're actually moving down the path, you'll see a bigger realization, oh, wow, there's actually a lot of additional roadblocks that I wasn't thinking about, right? Thinking of that as a second strategy and proactively already building around it is a mission critical. Otherwise, executives are going to be like, well, why are suddenly people asking us all these roadblocks? Versus we knew this was going to happen, right? This is exactly what we were already planning for. And that's why we're not just stuck in a reactive or crisis management perspective, right? This is something that should be expected and proactively addressed. Okay, so that was kind of a quick sprint through. And I think this is the initial gleam. I'm going to move very quickly to just a mini case looking at Target, you know, an at-scale retailer, and in particular trying to draw a very key angle around kind of sustainability and culture and embedding that. Yeah. 2 slides. So first one is, this one's an important just setup. What I'm going to show you on the next slide, we're going to look at both reputational implications as well as financial implications. So before I talk about reputation, I'm just going to set up, when I say reputation, I mean a very holistic and modern perspective, right? So we as the Harris Poll, we've been doing research on reputation. Like this year, we're going to be releasing with Axios. It'll be the 24th year we're doing it, right? So one of the academics you had at the beginning, very much, you know, the godfather of stakeholder kind of research, if you will. Up until 24 years ago, the only research on corporate reputation was Fortune's Most Admired, which is an interesting study, but it's basically business grading business. Like, picture a world today where the only lens in a C-suite was, do other businesses think we're doing a good job? Or do investors just think we're doing a good job? Right? So For the last 24 years, we've been running this study, and it really started this kind of conversation on how do we start thinking about our role in society and what is a holistic perspective on it. So traditionally, the focus would be very much on things like vision, growth, products and services, mission critical. Where a lot of the evolution has moved to is culture, ethics, and citizenship. Where one of the ideas, when you think of a modern corporate reputation that I would highlight, and these are companies that really win, Target does a great job here, is around this idea of shares my values. So again, just be thinking of that back of mind as we start talking a little bit about reputation. So mini case on Target. So as you look at the kind of the timeline on the left since 2019, the big thing here was that they were the first in to they actually made an announcement of this earlier. I think it was 2017 when they first announced they were going to do this, but they actually fully implemented in the middle of 2020, was the first to get to a $15 starting hourly wage, right? First in, very large retailer that has a big business impact. It's not just kind of whimsical. It's not a whimsical decision, right? You're talking about immediately costs of millions and very quickly tens of millions and very quickly hundreds of millions of dollars. But the big thing here is you're looking at that. In order for that to work and for that to happen, it has to be part of the fabric, it has to be part of the business strategy, and it really has to be embedded in the organization. And the main thing I just want to draw attention to is the degree to which it changes the lens through which, in this case, society views the company, right? So from that point, you're actually seeing a really impressive and unique growth curve that's not just on the culture of the company, right? It's not just about the workplace. One of the top elements of improvement is actually on vision of its strategy, right? It becomes very intuitive and apparent. Although I'm starting with employees, the second piece of it is just around ethics and conduct. Right? These are three of the hardest factors on reputation to actually proactively move, and ones that Target has really used as kind of like the foundation for driving its reputation forward. I'm not going to say that this is the only reason why they've outperformed financially, but you can actually see there's a very, very strong, at least, correlation over this same period of time as their reputation has dramatically improved and as they've made very specific investments in sustainability, broad term, and very specifically focused on their employees. They're about 200 since from beginning of January through March 2020, which is kind of lines up with the research. They're up about 230% in terms of stock price. Even if you take into consideration the kind of economic downturn, if you go to like present day, they're up about 130%. Right. So thank you. And are there any questions?
Well, congratulations to all at the Center for Sustainable Business with the 3rd anniversary. Normally, it takes over 18 years to achieve adulthood, but you've achieved it already and have proven to be an important driver for the biggest opportunity we all have, which is creating the net positive world that we all aspire to. Thank you all for all that you're doing, and enjoy.
Wishing everyone at CSB a very happy 3rd birthday. You all should feel very proud of what you've achieved in these short 3 years, and I'm honored to be part of the Academic Advisory Council for this amazing organization that really tries to make a difference in the world.
A very big congratulations to the Center of Sustainable Business on turning 3. Here's wishing many more years of continuing to champion the cause of sustainability and making a difference. Great job, CBN team.
Hi, I'm Ed Freeman, and I'm on the advisory board of the Center for Sustainable Business, and I want to offer my congratulations on this anniversary date for CSB. CB and all the folks who worked with the center, you've really done an incredible job at bringing issues of sustainability, what I would call stakeholder capitalism, and others to the center of business life in the Pittsburgh business community, in the Pitt business school community. And hey, keep it up. There's a lot more work to do. Congratulations.
Cheers to you, Center of Sustainable Business. Looking forward to seeing what you guys get up to in the coming years. Happy birthday.
Hi, my name is Kamila Knight, and I want to say congratulations to the Center for Sustainable Business. As a member of the Strategic Advisory Council, it has been such a pleasure and an honor to be a part of the journey over the last 3 years. I look forward to everything to come, and I say congratulations to the center again.
Dear CB and the whole team of the Center for Sustainable Business, happy birthday to you. Incredible that it's already been 3 years. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing and have a great party.
Hi, this is Trevor Youngheimen, faculty in the business school. Congratulations to the Center for Sustainable Business on its 3-year anniversary. A great institution in the business school, and hopefully one that will be around for a long time.